Millions of Americans struggle with addiction, with 80 people fatally overdosing on opioids every day. Now there's a new weapon in the fight against the opioid epidemic. The FDA has approved the first ever implant that continuously dispenses the opioid addiction medication buprenorphine for 6 months at a time. The medication inside the device has been used orally in over 14 years and has become a tool for stopping withdrawal symptoms. Joining us now to talk about this is Dr. Siegel. He's the principal investigator for the buprenorphine study and the medical director at the Siegel Institute for Clinical Research in Miami, Florida. He joins us along with his patient, Caroline, who participated in those clinical trials and is going to tell us her firsthand experience with the opioid implant. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Doctor, I want to start with you. What role do these clinical trials play in receiving that FDA approval?
Well, you have to have studies in order to get looked at by the FDA to approve the drug, so they're vitally important.
It's only available in one dose, 8 milligrams a day. And you can't obviously cut the rod in half or change it like you would be able to with a pill. Did that pose any challenges?
Well, not really. The studies are very specific as to what you're going to include within the study. So that wasn't a challenge in studies. In real practice, in real life, it will be somewhat limited, but not really. The average patient is on 8 milligrams. And since you could titrate somebody from a higher dose down a little bit before you put the implant on, or in, it shouldn't be much of a problem at all.
And hearing from some of the patients that have tried this before, there are a lot of benefits to not taking a pill by form every day. It's easier for them to normalize to life having the implant in them. Caroline, we want to thank you for joining us to share part of your story here. We realize that opioid addiction can be quite a personal battle, and yet you're showing bravery in sharing your story here. Can you tell us a little bit about your decision to participate in the clinical trial here?
Well, it took 6 months. When I went on it, I was more worried about that if I was going to have withdrawals and not work in my job as a regular waitress. And when they put the implant, actually I was worried because I was carrying like very heavy trays. And I would think that the implant would explode, but actually I didn't even feel it. I didn't even feel it that I had it the whole entire time.
Oh, and so you had that for during that entire time. But these implants are quite pricey for some patients. They're about $1,000 a month they can go. Is this something that you think you'd be able to afford moving forward?
Well, to me, addiction is a big toll on your life. And I would definitely do it. I would look for options, maybe insurance, because, is your life on the line.
I want to talk to you about the implant once it was removed. Did you experience any withdrawals, or did you have a plan moving forward after that implant was removed?
Well, I wasn't worried because I was with the team, with the doctors, and they actually tried to, when they took the implant off, tried to win me out. They were there to the very end until I took control of my own, of my own life. But they were there throughout the whole entire time until the end to try to wind me off.
Can I ask today, are you taking any type of opioid at all, or are you completely weaned off?
I'm completely weaned off.
Pain management can be a tricky situation. Obviously, it's a national discussion. Congress is even looking at ways to cut back on opioid abuse. Doc, tell us about this clinical study a bit here. People have been able to take the pill by form for more than a dozen years. Why make the implant or the switch to the implant? And what was the FDA's chief obstacle in approving something like this?
Well, because it's a new form of delivery for this product, that would probably be the biggest obstacle. Women have been using items like this, for instance, Norplant, for birth control for years, so it's not that it's a completely unique mechanism. However, for this type of addiction, certainly it is. And one of the problems that we've had, even though Suboxone is an excellent medicine, there has been some diversion where people are getting prescriptions and selling them. And so that's part of a problem. But the biggest issue, you would think that it wouldn't be, but when a patient misses an appointment or gets canceled or whatever the case may be, many times that's it. And then they go back on using drugs. And so it's a very tenuous control that you have over your addiction. So when you have the implant put in, you really, that takes that off the board, and you don't have to worry about it at all.
But are there any concerns that the implant alone wouldn't prevent a patient from still using? Could a patient theoretically have the implant and still use opioids?
It could happen, and we do see that rarely, but there's a few reasons why it doesn't. Number one, the substance buprenorphine or propofine, it saturates your receptors, so if you were to take other opiates, you're not going to get the buzz or the high that you normally would. So it pretty much renders them useless, and your cravings that you have normally are just not there. So, people are taking drugs for two reasons. One is because they feel badly and they have to treat themselves. The other is they're doing it because they're addicted or they're looking for that buzz, and all those things are off the table, again, once you're on this implant.
Are there any additional side effects with this implant that might be different than taking the pill form?
No, other than just the implant procedure, which we had a very good success. We've done several different studies with it, and we've had virtually no real issues. I was very concerned when we started to do our first one. I thought it was very invasive. I thought no one would want to do it. I thought people wouldn't be satisfied, and that was absolutely incorrect.
And now Caroline's here with you today to show that she's been one of the many patients that have gone through the trial here and said it went well as sort of a testimony to back this up. The clinical trial wrapped up some 2 years ago. FDA approval just now coming through last week. I imagine this is a big victory for those of you there.
Well, we're always very satisfied to see medications that we've worked on that did well. We're very happy to see them come out in the market. In terms of just being a researcher, in terms of a clinician, we're excited to have these new tools at our disposal. And if you will, I would like to just comment on the cost. Now, the typical cost for somebody on Suboxone, the film strips, is somewhere between $250 and $500 a month. And most people are covered insurance-wise, but not all. The cost, from what I hear, is going to be about $1,000 for this. So even though it's higher, I think insurances will be probably pretty happy to pay it because you don't have the relapses that are going to happen in between and the hospitalizations, which are much more costly.
Now, a lot of addicts go to methadone clinics to receive a dose typically every day. Is buprenorphine a safer option than methadone?
Yeah, methadone. So one of the issues with methadone, for the most part, you have to go every single day, so you can't take a day off. Methadone interacts with many other medicines, and so you have to be careful when you're taking that and other substances, so it's definitely a lot safer being on this implant.
And Carolina, how was it different for you, not taking a pill every day? Did you sort of forget that you had that underlying addiction? Were you able to feel more normal?
Yes, I really was. I even forgot all about it. It was like a breath reliever. I didn't have to worry about taking a medication or worry about anything. I went on with my normal life, and it was actually a very positive thing in my life when I was on it.
And Doc, there's a lot of talk about finding alternative methods to treat pain and to prevent addiction nationwide. Again, Congress still looking at other methods to expand insurance coverage to treat opioid addiction and to cover opioid addiction. This study that you wrapped up was some 2 years ago. You've done other work since then. Can you tell us anything else about what's next and what's the next frontier in battling opioid addiction?
Well, we do have a lot of medicines available for pain. However, I don't think both doctors and patients are real aware of it, so they tend to go towards the opiates. And in terms of the opiate addiction, I think that they'll probably be expanding, I'm assuming, other types of milligram strengths of these implants, and then they'll come up with other ways of taking medicines, and perhaps even a longer period of time that the implant would be available in your system, maybe perhaps a year.
So it sounds like eventually you want to sort of tailor the amount of medication that's in each implant?
I mean, that would be the most helpful, and I think we'll be able to. However, this is it's fairly standard, the 8 milligram dose, so it's not really that big of a deal, but certainly any of the outliers, you'd love to be able to treat them as well.
Let's talk about the surgeons and the doctors who actually put the implant in and remove it. Is that something that doctors typically know how to do, or does this involve additional training?
Well, it involves additional training, so it depends what type of doctor. We were very fortunate in our research institute. We have Dr. Stevens Shavasty, who's a gynecologist, and he's had a lot of experience putting in Norplant and in the implant. So he was involved, and in fact, I think he even created a new device to implant and explant, and he's training, along with another couple people, training doctors around the country to be able to do this.
Are there any doctors or any researchers currently that you're aware of working on a similar implant device that could treat pain locally as opposed to the way that a pill form would? Or is there any way to treat pain where it stems from as opposed to sort of overtaking the whole body?
Well, sure. There's lots of ways. There's sometimes people have electronic types of units. There's different surgeries you could do. There's skin type creams and pain and patches that deliver pain medication directly to the area. So depending on what is the issue, there are definitely alternatives.
And so many of those alternatives are what lawmakers are looking for doctors to consider before jumping to the overprescription or the regular habitual prescription of these opioid drugs that we can see lead to so many of these problems.
Yeah, no, that's true. And also you got to really try to understand what you're treating, because there's different types of pain. The easiest way to look at it is dull pain and sharp pain. And if you don't lead the witness and ask them what they are and what type of pain they have, generally they'll say sharp, which is a different type of pain generally than you need to treat with opiates. And so I would say 90% of the patients, when I ask that question, they say they have sharp pain, and that's a neuropathic pain, and there's other types of non-opiate medicines that usually help that very well, and actually probably better. However, of course, opiates will help everything to some extent because it makes you feel better as well.
One final question. A lot of critics are saying this implant would incentivize patients to not attend addiction counseling. What's your response to that?
That's another fallacy that I would have agreed with a few years back. I remember the first study, in addition to taking these implants that I thought were intrusive, patients were required to go to counseling. In fact, it was computer counseling twice a week, and they had to give urines, although they didn't know they didn't really have to, 3 times a week. And I said, what addict is going to run here 3 times a week and give? They really did. The counseling at the end of the sessions, they found that the counseling was the most effective part of the treatment. So they were and they didn't have to go. So they were very much involved with that. So I don't think it would be an issue.
All right. Well, Dr. Siegel, thanks so much for sharing your insight. And Carolina, thanks so much for sharing your story with us.
You're welcome.
Certainly an inspiring story there, and it's always good to see one of those stories where something works out well. It had to be rewarding for the researchers, too, to see their hard work pay off.
Yeah, certainly for those researchers who are stuck in the lab all day looking at data, it has to be so nice for them to sort of take a step back and appreciate and feel rewarded for their hard work and seeing such a successful story like Carolina's.
Yeah, it's not often they get to see the patients themselves and see their story come full circle. We will stress, though, that the FDA, while they have approved this implant, not for widespread use. Right now there's a 100 patient limit per physician. That's what we understand. So this still could become more available as we get more data. We'll continue to follow up on this story as so much of the nation is watching the opioid crisis develop.
All right, more news will continue after this. Stay with us.